Bem-vindo ao Bloom Podcast. A cada episódio, Rodolfo Oliveira e um convidado partilharão histórias do mundo da gestão, do marketing, da comunicação e até inovação. Let's talk!
Olá, este é o Bloom Podcast e eu sou Rodolfo Oliveira. Estamos hoje aqui à conversa com Jonathan Murray, Executive Vice President e Chief Technology Officer da consultora Digital Prism Advisors. O Jonathan tem uma carreira muito diversificada, tendo desempenhado funções de liderança na sede da Microsoft em Seattle, bem como de ligação de tecnologia ao negócio, enquanto CTO no grupo Warner Music e de forma interina no New York Times, muito provavelmente o mais reconhecido jornal mundial. Em comum, estes são dois setores profundamente transformados pela tecnologia e pela digitalização. Desde fevereiro de 2016, o Jonathan e os restantes diretores na Digital Prism Advisors lideram uma equipa que aconselha a liderança das administrações na definição de estratégias de crescimento e transição digitais nos mais diversos setores. So, thank you for being with us today, Jonathan.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure, Rodolfo.
Thank you. So, Jonathan, again, it's great to be with you and have you on the podcast and share your experience on the digital transformation for companies worldwide. So let me start with just a quick question, which I believe still is something that stymies boards' initiatives. When saying that digital transformation is paramount for companies to survive, where to start? Where should they be looking to catch up?
A great question. I think one of the questions that we get asked is, what does digital transformation actually mean, right? And where do you start? I think the starting point, we talk to companies about, and we think this is an important distinction, about becoming digital, right? Digital transformation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and depending on who you speak to, there'll be a different definition of what that means. What we help CEOs and boards figure out is, what does it mean to become a digital company? And that, to us, has a very specific set of requirements. It really starts with a company that is driven by data and uses data, both starts by ensuring that you're collecting data from all of the points of interaction that you have with customers or clients, that you are collecting data from the usage of your products in the marketplace, that you're bringing that data into the organization and are able to have a 360-degree view of both the performance of your products, but more importantly, the needs and the requirements of your customers. What they've bought, what they're interested in, what their requirements are, what they value, those sorts of things. And so for us, a digital firm, to become digital starts with, do you have the ability to collect, manage, analyze, and make use of all of those sources of data that are important to running a modern business today? And what we find with many organizations is they have some pockets of data. They may have good client data in their CRM system. They may have a few products that are generating data from the performance of the product. But generally, the clients that we work with don't have that ability to bring that all together into a 360-degree view. So the first place we start with a client is, okay, do you have a clear definition of what you want to be in 3 to 5 years' time? And that sounds sort of fairly basic, but a lot of the clients that we work with haven't actually done that primary strategy work. They sort of understand where their business is going, the markets they're in, the customers they're serving today, but they don't really have a clear picture of what the ambition of the firm is and where they aspire to grow and what markets they would want to be in, what customers are serving, let's say 3 to 5 years out. So to answer your question directly, the first thing we sort of spend time with clients is helping them paint that picture, helping them get a good understanding of what the future opportunity is, what market opportunity they have as a firm, and what products they might bring to market, and what customers they might serve, and what strategies they need to put in place in order to execute on that growth strategy for the overall firm. That's where we typically start with a client.
So not a technology perspective, but actually like how do the business wants to evolve, and then from there go to whatever technologies are needed?
That's a really important point that you make, which is too many of these types of consulting engagements with clients sort of end up, starting with technology. Well, we've got this solution and it can solve this problem for you. Or, oh, you just need to get off this old platform that you're on and into the cloud, and that'll solve all your problems. And what we understand is one of the things I think makes us a little bit unique in the engagements we do with clients and what we provide is that we start with strategy, which is what do you want to be as a firm, market opportunity, the customers, customer value, etc. And then we talk a lot about culture of the organization, right? Which is, do you have the right people? Do you have the right skills? Are you really a data-driven? Do you as a leadership team require data to be used in order to make business decisions, et cetera, et cetera? You have all of those conversations around strategy, the roadmap of where you want to go, the sort of product strategy, before you ever have a conversation about technology. Technology has ultimately got to be an enabler of that strategy, but you've got to figure out what the strategy is, the business strategy overall, the growth strategy, and the product strategy, and the go-to-market strategy that's going to empower that business strategy. Those things have to happen first.
Okay, that's great insight. So that leads me to my next question, which is, what do you see that are the industries that are leading this transformation, and why do you perceive them as being the leaders on this transformation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so. And again, this is interesting from the set of clients that we serve, which is we're all familiar with who the leaders are, right? So the Googles of the world, Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, we're all familiar with these companies that essentially grew up as digital businesses and have disrupted major sectors of the economy, right? Whether it's Amazon and retail and actually technology services, right? Or whether it's Airbnb in the hotel and the lodging market, or whether it's Uber in transportation, those companies have completely disrupted those markets. And the typical client that we deal with is a very traditional business, maybe an industrial company, right? One of our clients that we've served for the last 3 years is one of the large, well, actually they are the global leader in leasing bulk liquid shipping containers, right? Very industrial product, the things that big chemical companies use to move chemicals around, and they lease those containers to all of these industrial companies. So it's not, you wouldn't think of that as a digital business. It's a very traditional industrial business. And yet their business is being disrupted by new entrants, new firms who start off as being digital companies. And so as a traditional firm that's number one in their market, if they want to retain that position, they're going to have to figure out how to leverage digital to continue to be competitive, to continue to be the leader in their industry. And so a lot of our clients are very successful companies in their industries, but in very traditional, industries. And they're looking to us to help them figure out how to apply digital to retain that leadership and to defend against these new disruptive entrants into their market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now if we go from there in like a little bit into a vision into the future, what do you believe would be the main digital trends that companies should be looking at to ensure that they stay on top of the changes happening on their market? What are those trends?
Well, I think customer experience, some of these are in a sense not rocket science, right? But they are, I think if you set aside firms that started off as digital startups and grew and became successful, if you set those to the side for a second, because they are digital companies, they were born digital, right? The vast majority of companies in the world today are 40, 50 years old, maybe even longer. Some of our clients are over 100 years old, and they were not born digital. And so the trends that are important to them are the things that we have come to accept as consumers as a baseline for how we buy services or how we consume products. And so things like a digital consumer experience, You know, that if I'm buying a product from you as a company, I expect to be able to go online. I expect to be able to manage my experience with you as a company. So all banks today, or all insurance companies, provide you a portal. You can go in, you can look at your bank statement, you can make transactions, etc. That's an experience that we now expect from every company that we do business with. Doesn't matter which sector you're in. So if you're in manufacturing, retail, transportation, what have you, I expect that same level of experience. And that's quite challenging for some firms, right? Which is they don't have that infrastructure. They don't have those capabilities. So I would say, as a trend, the continued trend to ever greater levels of digital experience for consumers, ever higher levels of self-service, right? So that's critically important. So that no matter what business you're in, the benchmark is being set by Amazon, it's being set by Google, it's being set by all of these major players in the digital space. You have to match that. Because if you don't match that, then some other entrant into your market who's got venture financing, they've got capital, they started digital, they'll do a better job of building that consumer experience. And if we understand anything in the world today, consumer experience is really meaningful for driving product growth, for driving customer engagement, et cetera, right? So I would say that continued elevated importance of customer experience is important. The move to the cloud, which sort of is well over 10 years old now, right? It's almost 15 years old. But yet most companies are still in transition of moving away from on-premise infrastructure to cloud-based self-service. I think that transition has a lot of momentum and will continue. But you're starting to see, and you have seen for the last 5, 6, 7 years, higher levels of what managed services in the cloud. So the first step is moving your infrastructure, your instances of servers and your existing footprint into the cloud. But now you've got these very advanced managed services, particularly around machine learning and advanced AI, that are things that you can just subscribe to. So as long as you can provide the data, Amazon, Google, Microsoft will have these very sophisticated services where you can run machine learning algorithms against your data and build true ML-based services for your consumers, for your customers, and empower your products with new machine learning capabilities, which in the past would have required you to hire a whole team of data scientists and machine learning experts and build a whole infrastructure. And now you can buy that as a service. So I think the continued expansion of machine learning into broader and broader product categories enabled by these managed services that are provided by the large cloud players, that's an important trend. And then, of course, there's a lot of hype around crypto. There's a lot of hype around NFTs and blockchain. And I'm just going to say I'm a huge skeptic. I know that's not the popular thing to say because there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off those technologies. But there are really foundational problems with the infrastructure underpinning blockchain that make it a real challenge to scale that as a truly global enterprise level transactional platform. And so, yes, there will be some niche opportunities, but a lot of what people are putting forward today as blockchain solutions actually would be better served and better delivered with traditional models of computing. The blockchain thing gets them a lot of venture finance, it gets a lot of interest and marketing and all that sort of stuff. But the net result is the consumer's experience would actually be better if you'd built that on a traditional computing, cloud computing model and not use the blockchain technology. There are very, very, very few blockchain solutions that have a unique value proposition that could not be more efficiently delivered through traditional computing. And that's why I'm a skeptic. And then the NFT market is really interesting, which is there's going to be a place for being able to create secure digital assets. That is a real market opportunity. And the arts is foundational place where that can take place. But there's a lot of maturing to do in that world. So for artists, I say take every advantage you can. Start generating your NFTs. there are plenty of buyers out there that seem to be willing to buy them. But as an investor in the NFT space, I'd be very careful. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of problems with the governance of those NFT marketplaces, etc. So, that's one, again, where I'm skeptical, not because of the technology isn't useful, it's a useful use of crypto, but the whole governance model around it and the state of the actors that are playing in those marketplaces is a real pause for caution. You need to be very careful.
Okay. That kind of was part of my next question. So going back to what you said, I just out of pure curiosity, two things. What then would you see a potential use of blockchain where you perceive it to be unique? And the other new trend which everybody's talking about is the metaverse, and what's your take on that?
Look, the blockchain, there are certain, if you generalize blockchain to be essentially a distributed ledger technology, there are some use cases, financial transactions, etc., where a distributed ledger is an interesting concept and may have a sort of unique value proposition. Where I get concerned, and this is really from a policy perspective on blockchain, is that everybody talks about blockchain as freeing you from that central authority, right? So one of the primary, particularly when you think about DAOs, everybody's getting excited that you can implement all of these new social models on blockchain technology because the blockchain technology does not require a central governance authority, right? It's not a bank controlling it, or it's not the government controlling it, and everybody gets excited about that. But the problem is there are governance authorities in the blockchain model. If they're financial transactions or if it's coins, then there are marketplaces. There are multiple marketplaces. Those marketplaces are unregulated. And bluntly, as an individual, I would rather actually deal with a financial transaction that I know is backed by a federal, a US government regulatory body than some random, venture-backed coin marketplace. And again, we're seeing lots and lots of fraud and problems in those marketplaces. There've been some spectacular failures of some of these DAOs, these distributed, voting, communities using the blockchain technology. So there isn't a pure separation between one model has an authority and I don't want that authority to be messing around my business, and another model just being pure unfettered sort of freedom of of transaction. That's not true. There are authorities in these new models, and a lot of them are not regulated. A lot of them are, maybe not going to be here tomorrow. So there's real problems with that environment from a policy, from a regulation, and from a just how those models are going to work. From a metaverse perspective, I think the jury's really out. I think that I look at the metaverse technology, and there are two models around, next generation of reality and experiences, right? There's the, immersive, VR, virtual reality model, which Facebook with its metaverse strategy seems to be, placing all its money behind. And then there's augmented reality, right? Which is essentially taking our real world and overlaying our real world experience with augmented data and information. Personally, I think the AR market is bigger. I think the concept that I'm going to go and wake up in the morning, have my coffee, put on a set of VR goggles, and be immersed in a VR environment for my entire working day, working with my colleagues in a pure VR environment, and then going out in the evening to have dinner in a VR environment in the metaverse, as Facebook would imagine it. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's dangerous for society. I think the fact that we are creating an environment, Facebook already has its own problems in terms of its impact on how we vote, how we make decisions as a society, what voices get amplified, etc. the thought that we're going to have a generation where Facebook is going to have people disconnect from actual reality and live in this virtual world, again, with with very little regulation or controls or what have you, I actually find very troubling. I think that's a real problem for society that we're going to have to deal with, far greater than the influence of Facebook in our political environment today, as we've experienced over the last several years. So I think augmented reality, though, from a business perspective, is ultimately a bigger market. I think the fact that people will have glasses that they will wear, Apple, I think, is going to come out with an augmented reality experience that you will overlay data that's important to you. You're walking down the street, you pass a restaurant, you'll be able to see the restaurant ratings, you'll be able to get directions to where you want to go overlaid on your normal, experience of reality. I think that's a more powerful, a more acceptable, and ultimately a larger, revenue market than, Facebook's view of what the metaverse is.
Okay, great info and great perspective into it. So moving into another area from your experience is that you have led organizations that were undergoing profound transformations, namely the music industry and the media. And how do you see those industries evolve in terms of reaching out new audiences and diversify revenue streams moving forward?
Well, I think both of those industries have actually navigated. Well, I should be more precise in my answer. I think the music industry has very successfully navigated that transition. It wasn't clear that they were going to, but I think the introduction of streaming services, it goes back to what I said before. Consumers want rich, engaged experiences, right? That's the benchmark. And the old experience of buying music, and I say that, buying a CD, then either playing it or ripping the tracks off the CD so you could play them digitally. There's a lot of friction in that experience, right? And what Spotify, Apple, and others have realized is if you remove friction, and this is true of any digital business, to be fair, if you remove friction from the transaction, you'll sell more product. That's what it boils down to, right? And so in the music industry, really sort of bought into that, which is it took them a while. It took them 10 years or more. But once they figured that out, and you have services and platforms like Spotify and Apple and what have you, then that frictionless ability to consume music just means people consume more music. Now, you can argue about whether the revenue model is fair to artists, whether what it does for new entrants and new artists and their ability to build an audience and all that sort of stuff. Those are still real challenges in the music industry. But the music industry, if you think of it as the three large global music majors and the global distribution of music, is about as healthy as it's ever been today. And by the way, one of the fastest growing segments of the physical music business is vinyl, right? Who would have thought, right? That vinyl sales are going up by large percentage points every year because the consumer now has a choice. I can stream music. And by the way, I can stream music at lossless, high audiophile quality today. So there's no trade-off. So I can stream music wherever I am, on whatever device I have, my phone, my car, on a player in the house, etc. So I have full access, frictionless access to music wherever I am. So I'm going to consume more music. And then if I want that physical experience, then I go back to vinyl, and I'm willing to pay a premium for that. And actually, if you look at the music industry, what they've done in the last 10, 15 years, they've gone back and pulled all those master tapes off the shelves, and they've remastered those albums and are pressing vinyl albums today that are an order of magnitude higher quality than any vinyl you would have bought back in the day when those albums originally came out. The quality of the masters, because of digital technology, the quality of what we're pulling off those old magnetic tapes and creating new masters from, and then pressing onto vinyl today makes, if you buy a vinyl version of a Beach Boys album today, or a Pink Floyd album, or Pick Your Artist, or a Led Zeppelin album that's been remastered in the last 5 or 10 years, it will be a revelation when you listen to it compared to any pressing on vinyl that you would have heard when that album originally came out. And that's due to digital technology. That's part of that digital transformation. So the music industry is very healthy. They've made that transition. The newspaper industry, it depends on the newspaper, to be quite honest. There's one major player, the player that I worked for, that we were talking about before, the New York Times, who have very successfully converted from physical, subscription-based, buying a newspaper, to a digital subscription-based model, and have very healthy financials as a result of that. That is not true of regional papers in the United States, who are still trying to find a revenue and a business model that works. It's not true of a lot of the other major newspapers, the LA Times, the Washington Post, now owned by Jeff Bezos, et cetera, et cetera. So newspaper health, the health of the newspaper industry is marginal, and you have some players who have successfully made the transition, and the New York Times is certainly one of them.
Great. Let's hope that some more find that road to success.
For sure, we need that.
Sure. So going back to exactly what you're mentioning is the new model, which is the subscription model that most companies are looking at. But the recent financial results from some companies, like Netflix recently, show that there are some potential pitfalls on putting all your bets on that strategy. Do you see this as a blip, or an otherwise successful trend, or just the harbinger of things to come?
So that's a great question. I think my perspective on that is, I asked the question, do we think globally we're going to be consuming more media, set music aside, but more video media, TV, film, YouTube, etc., right? So all of your video media types, right, whether produced or by studios or generated by individual producers, are we going to be consuming more next year than we are this year? Absolutely. Are we going to be consuming lots more 10 years from now than we are today? Absolutely. Is that the way that we will ultimately all consume our TV and our movies? Absolutely. Right. So if that's the answer to my question, then what we're seeing with Netflix today is a blip, right? It isn't saying there's something structurally changing about the market, the consumer market. That market, in my view, at least my personal opinion, is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to grow significantly. And ultimately, as global consumers, we're all going to consume our movies, TVs, film, video, etc., streaming it over the network. That's the model we will use. Netflix's issue, I think, is probably a Netflix issue, right? And firms that have subscriptions need to be able to underpin that subscription with a really strong value proposition. That's what, a lot of the work that we do with our clients who want to move from a physical product to a subscription-based product is around, okay, can you clearly articulate what the value proposition is? Does that value proposition support the subscription fee that you want? Is there enough value in that service that the consumer views the subscription fee as something that is a fair exchange of value? I think that's something that all firms that are in this business continually have to reevaluate. Now, I think the challenge right now is that we're in a transition in the video, what I would call the video distribution. Well, let's say the produced video distribution, movie and TV. We're in a very significant transitional time in that market. And what I say is, in the US, as an example, most consumers historically have consumed that content via cable, either cable or direct broadcast satellite, right? With Dish and with but either direct broadcast satellite or cable. And in Europe, a lot of direct broadcast satellite. That we're now moving to online, and you've got players like Apple with Apple TV who are aggregating those channels, and you've got each of those channels themselves trying to build their subscription value proposition with their consumers. And for consumers right now, that's not a very good experience. And from a personal experience, we travel a lot, and we get all of that content, TV and movies, over an Apple TV device when we're on the road. I have to have a separate subscription for every channel that I used to get as a bundle when I had cable. I paid one, when I was using cable, I paid one fee a month. I may have thought it was too expensive, but I paid one fee a month. It was fairly frictionless, and I got 300 channels, right? On Apple TV, I have to have an app for each of those channels, for each of those, Paramount has an app, CBS, NBC has an app, the Discovery Channel has an app. So you have to have a separate app. You have to have a separate subscription. And ultimately, it's costing me way more today to consume that content on a digital distribution than it ever did with cable. That has to change. That has to become, this goes back to the music industry's experience. That has to become a frictionless experience for the consumer. I just want to pay somebody a subscription every month and make sure that I can get access to that content. How you divide that subscription on the back end amongst all of those providers is not part of the business that I really want to understand or be involved in as a consumer. And right now, we're in the middle of that mess of everybody trying to figure out what that new business model is for the distribution of movies and TV. That will get resolved. It's a blip. Over the next 5 years, I'm pretty sure those models will get streamlined. And as I said, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that will be a fairly frictionless experience for consumers, is my experience. And we will be consuming a lot more of that media.
Mm-hmm. I'll get back to that, because there's one question that I kind of would like you to have your take on it as well, which is, how do you see that when you have a both physical and digital experience? Let's put it an example. Tesla or another provider where you have a service, it's kind of a subscription service for some of the things that you may need on a car, while at the same time you have the experience of driving the car. So how do you have that, or healthcare or whatever? Where do you see that changing on those models where you cannot purely digitize the whole experience?
Great question. Those have to become blended, seamless experiences, right? So they're always going to, and I'll go back to a client that we've worked with for the last 3 years, an industrial company in a very industrial business dealing with very physical product, right? Not digital products at all. But there's a really important aspect of layering a digital experience onto that product. So it's a big industrial physical product, but guess what? The client, the customer for that product, wants to be able to go online on any device that they have. They want to see when that product's being delivered, when the service intervals are on that product, what repair costs may be associated with the product while they were leasing it. That has to be, all of that done through a set of physical/digital separate interactions today. And it's not a seamless thing. Some things get handled by fax, some things get handled by email, some things get handled by somebody picking up a phone and calling somebody and asking them a question. And the importance of digital to that client is to make all of those interactions seamless, right? So if a customer or client has a question, they can get an answer to that question themselves. They can self-service. They can do a new lease for that product themselves without actually having to interact with somebody and go through a physical transaction. That's a physical product augmented with a seamless digital experience. And Tesla's the same. It's a car. I drive the car, but my digital experience needs to be seamless. So if I'm at home and I'm planning a trip, then I need to be able to sit at my laptop or on my tablet or on my phone. I should be able to plan the route for my trip. And as I move from the house and I lock my front door and I get into the car, that trip that I've planned and the route that I've planned and the stops that I have on my route should seamlessly, without my interaction, transition to the navigation system in the car. That's a truly seamless experience. And you and I both know, because back in the day, right, we did all of these wonderful videos at Microsoft about the future of healthcare, the future of manufacturing, and they all talked about or the future of the home. They all talked about this seamless experience. We're not quite there yet, right? That seamlessness, that friction still exists. And the handoff between an experience I have on a mobile device, the experience I have on a tablet or my laptop or what have you, transitioning into another place where I'm consuming the same information is still not completely frictionless. And so I think over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's where you're going to start to see the innovation, is that I don't have to think about that, right? The services I use are smart enough to know, hey, you're at home, you're in your home context, you're doing things on this device. And as you move from your home context to your car or your automobile context, that data is going to flow, that information is going to flow, and you won't have to make a decision. It's just there for you at your fingertips, as Bill would used to say, and you're ready to go. And if it's an autonomous car, once you get into the car, it asks you whether you're ready to leave, and it leaves, and it follows the route that you planned when you're in your home. That's a truly seamless digital experience. We've got a ways to go, but we're on the path to that in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. So now you as advisors, you have a unique perspective of the whole company when you're dealing with your customers, and we in our podcast is very much focused on marketing and communications professionals. So going back to that, what do you see as the main challenges and the changes that are happening currently on the marketing and communication professionals should be looking at to make sure that they are, at par with their best peers?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I would reflect that a lot of times the experience when you walk into a client is that marketing, particularly in the more traditional firms, marketing is seen as a downstream activity, right? So we make strategy decisions, we decide which products to build, we build products, and then we sort of ask the marketing team, and they likely are involved in the product development cycle and sort of developing the marketing for the product, etc. I am a firm believer in marketing being involved at the strategy level, right? Because ultimately, how a firm communicates with its audience is the responsibility of marketing. And that starts with how you're going to talk to the world about your strategy, about your value proposition as your firm. A lot of firms today becoming more purpose-driven, right? It isn't just about building and selling a product and making money. It's about your contribution to the world. It's about ESG, right? What you're doing for social responsibility, for climate change, all of these things. The marketing team needs to be involved in those upstream strategy conversations. They need to be there at the table contributing to how to position the firm, how to position the value proposition, how to help define what this digital experience, what the value of this digital experience is going to be to the firm's client. And then involved all the way through. And as I said right back at the beginning, the definition of what a truly digital firm is to me is a firm that uses data in every decision that it makes. And that includes marketing, right? Marketing professionals are used to using data to make marketing decisions. They look at the performance of campaigns. They look at, web statistics. There are a whole bunch of data points that marketing professionals use. The problem is, in a lot of companies, those are not part of the overall picture that a senior leadership team will look at. And when I say a 360-degree view of your markets and a 360-degree view of your clients, I mean every piece of data, every data point that you have, and that includes marketing data. That includes how campaigns are performing in the marketplace, what's resonating, what messaging is working. Are you doing A/B testing in your marketing campaigns and getting feedback on that and bringing that back into the middle so that anybody who's making a decision around product, about business strategy, about market strategy, is able to leverage that data and those insights to basically drive performance of the overall firm.
That's great. So wrapping up, and this is something that I always ask, is like, if you would be in a position to advise someone who is looking into moving into a professional career into marketing and communications, what would be your key advice for them?
If you're going to move into marketing and communications, I think I would just go back to what I just said. Make sure you have a strong background in data, right? That you understand the power of data, that you have the basic disciplines in doing data analysis, that you understand, just fundamental stuff like the statistics, that you have that foundational understanding. You need, depending on which bit of marketing you're in, you obviously foundationally need your creative skill set, your ability to write, your ability to, think strategically, to synthesize complex problems into simple messages for customers. All of those are core skills that modern marketing professionals have always needed. But I think the difference today is marketing professionals who understand the intersection between marketing performance and business performance, and are able to sit in a conference, able to sit in a boardroom with a CEO or with board members or senior leaders in the business, line of business leaders, and be able to draw a direct connection between what that business leader cares about, which is revenue performance, margin, product growth, etc., and marketing execution, and being able to tie those two worlds together. Marketing has suffered, over time from not being able to truly demonstrate the value of the investment in marketing. Sometimes we're a little loose in our definitions of what value and return on investment look like in marketing. And I think modern marketing professionals are absolutely able to find the data, make sure the data is there to be able to draw that direct connection to business performance. And I think that's critical for somebody who's looking to build a marketing career today.
Okay. Thanks a lot for being with us today, Jonathan.
You're very welcome. It was a real pleasure, Rodolfo, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.